In this video, I'm going to give a brief explanation of each of the options in the time entry add-on configuration screen. From here, you'll notice Manage Time Codes and Timesheet Settings buttons. By clicking on the Manage Time Codes, it takes you to the place where you can customize your time codes. Timesheet Settings takes you to the page where you can manage your timesheet settings. That will be covered in another video. For the main time entries, you can turn on and off actual hours input, turn on and off billable hours input. So if you're doing time tracking where you want to keep your costs and your client's costs, like what you bill out, both at the same time, you would check both of these boxes. If you're only doing actual hours for your own internal purposes, you would simply have actual only, which is the default. Or sometimes you only care about your billable hours, so you can choose which of these two options you would like to do. This other checkbox here to enable the time entry grid, by default it's on. Some clients don't want their team members entering time by grid, so you can turn that off here. If you click this link, the new time entry grid default settings, that screen lets you configure the default settings for every user who goes to the time grid. That also will be covered in another video. If you are entering time entry by hours, meaning I'm going to put in 1.5 or 2.2 hours in a decimal, you can actually round your time entries to the nearest decimal place, by 5%, 10%, 20, 0.25, 0.5, or 1. So I can do closest, or I can actually go up. So if someone works on a time entry, it'll round up to the nearest value here, or you can round it down. Most of the time it's just not even enabled. Closest 0 hour, this doesn't really round it at all. Professional services and billable entries, this is if you install the budgeting add-on. There's a whole another level of options here that will be covered in another video. The next section here, tracking by hours and minutes. If you check this box, instead of putting a decimal in, the team member will put in 1 hour colon 15 to indicate 1 hour and 15 minutes. Decimal entries will automatically show in hours and minutes. So this is an option if some clients don't want their users to say 0.25 or 0.5 and they want to put in a real clock kind of methodology, they would check these boxes. The time entries allowed section, this is important because sometimes clients they don't want time entries to be allowed at the project or at the company level. That means it's attached to just a company, it doesn't have to be attached to a project or a task. Unchecking this box forces all time entries to always be attached to a project or a task. Unchecking this box disables the ability to enter a time entry at the project level. So if I have these two boxes unchecked, all time entries have to be on a task, for example. So the default is that you can enter time at the company level or the project level or the task level. This section here enables time entries to be entered on issues. This turns on time entry on issues. If you don't want time entries on an issue, simply uncheck the box. Another option here is to put time entries on to-dos. If you want time entries to be allowed on to-dos, you can do that. Now, the only issue with time entries on issues and to-dos is that if you're using rate cards, which I'm not describing here, they don't work quite the same way as they do on projects and tasks. So if you're not doing rate cards and you have very simple rate adjustments for your time entries, then you don't need to worry about those at all. The last part here, enable time entries to be entered on any work item without being assigned. If you have this checked, which it is on by default, it allows any team member to put a time entry on any work item, even if they're not assigned to that work item. This is really useful because sometimes someone comes and helps out on a task or does some work, they're not assigned to it, and they need to be able to log some time. And there's really not much harm in having this checkbox checked because very infrequently does a person go and put a time entry on something that they're not working on. It's, normally a challenge to get everyone to always put their time entries in, so it's on by default. The last section here, the other, When this is checked, holiday and PTO inputs are on the time entry grid. That means that they can put in holiday hours and paid time off in there. And these other couple options turns on the ability for users to change the dates on their time entry grid and custom dates on the worksheet, and a couple other really minor options that you can turn on and off. So normally these options don't really need to, other than the first one, don't really matter too much. So that covers most of this screen. Our consultants can definitely help you work through any of your questions you have. Hopefully this video answers some of the questions when it comes to some of the more advanced options you have in time tracking on Project Insight.